Welcome to Tabletop Math. Before you begin to play, it is best to know the rules for the different games. Each card will have a math question and a point value associated with it. How it's used in each game is a little bit different. You will be recording your answers on a handout, showing your work, and recording your points. Each game will use an answer key card that does have all of the answers for each of the cards. Once all answers are submitted, the person with the answer key card will determine if they were correct, and then they will pass the answer key card to the next player for the next round. If you know what game you're playing, you can go ahead and skip ahead to those rules. Journey is a traditional board game for 2 to 4 players. Before you get started, you're going to need to make sure that you have your dice and action cards. To set up, cards are sorted into different piles by point values. 1, 2, and 4-point cards will go into different piles. Action cards go into a separate pile. Game spaces are either blank, 1, 2, 4, or action. You're going to be putting all of your movers in the center of the board to begin. The player who had the last birthday goes first. The player rolls a dice and moves anywhere on the game board but cannot return to the same space they were on. They draw a card from the correct pile. When the card is a math question, all players will attempt the question. The player who drew the card can earn the point value of the card. All other players can earn 1 point if they are correct. If the player who drew the card is correct, they earn the points and they keep the card. Action cards can be played before the math questions, and it affects the round. Once all action cards are drawn, the action spaces will be treated as blanks. When it's time to clean up, or you run out of math cards, the player that has earned the most points wins. In the case of a tie, the player with the most 4-point cards wins. Conquer is a strategy board game for 2 players. In addition to the math cards, you're going to need either colored cubes or a laminated game board with dry erase pins. To set up, each player has 12 spaces that they can distribute their troops. They will receive 24 troops. Players cannot have more than 3 troops on a hexagon at any given time, and every space must at least have 1 troop. You will also need to shuffle up all the math cards together. The player who is the youngest is the attacker first. There are 2 phases to gameplay: play and refortification. Each play phase involves 2 math problems. The first attacker will alternate at each play phase. The top card is flipped over. On the card, it denotes the power of the card: 1, 2, or 4. The attacker determines which hexagon to attack and from which hexagon they will be attacking from. The number of the attacker's troops plus the value of the card must be greater than the number of troops in the defender's hexagon. If this is not possible, they are not able to attack and the defender becomes the attacker. Both players will solve the problem, and there are 4 possible results. If both players are correct, the defender loses their troops, and the attacker must move at least 1 troop onto that hexagon. The defender would then become the attacker on the next card. What if neither are correct? Well, no troops are lost, and the defender becomes the attacker on the next card. What if only the attacker is correct? Well, the defender loses all of their troops, the attacker must move at least 1 troop onto that hexagon, and the attacker remains the attacker. But what if the defender is the only one correct? Well, the attacker loses all of their troops, and the defender must move at least 1 troop onto the hex. The defender becomes the attacker on the next card. After the play phase, there's a refortification phase, and players rearrange their troops. For a troop to be sent to another hexagon, they must be connected. Once complete, another play phase will happen. How do you win? If a player reaches either of their opponent's home hexes, they will win. If each hexagon only has 1 troop, the team with the most hexagons in their control is the winner. Draft is a pick and pass card game for 3 to 4 players. In addition to your math cards, you will also need action cards. To set up, all math cards are shuffled together. 2 special action cards are passed out prior to the game to each player. They can be played at any point in the game. There are 3 rounds. 8 cards are dealt out to each player at the start of each round. Each player will choose a card from their hand, and they will attempt the problem they have chosen. Correctly solved questions earn points. If a player is correct, they get to keep the card. Incorrect cards will go back into the extra deck. After completing problems, players pass their hand of cards to the player on their left. They then select a card from their new hand, and the game continues in this way. After 6 problems have been completed in a round, the remaining cards are discarded and shuffled into the next round. After 3 rounds, players will total their points. Whoever has the most points wins. In the case of a tie, the player with the most 4-point cards wins. Mystery is a secret mission card game for 3 to 4 players. In addition to your math cards, you will also need your secret task cards. For example, a secret task may be to collect letters that will spell an animal. So, players may strategically have to decide what cards they will draft on their turns. The number of turns in a round depends on the number of players. So if there are 3 players, there will be 3 turns in a round. The rounds will have 2 phases, a drafting phase and a solving phase. In the drafting phase, each round, cards are laid in the middle of a table for everyone to see. The number of cards is the same as the number of players each time. The first chooser selects 1 card, and the rest are selected going clockwise until all players have selected a card. The player to the first chooser's left then becomes the first chooser. Again, supposing that you have 3 players in this game, you will do this 3 times before the solving phase. In the solving phase, once all players have chosen their cards, players will complete their questions. If players get correct answers, they will keep the card. Incorrect cards will be returned to the deck. After the solving phase, another drafting phase will occur. This will happen until there are not enough cards to complete a drafting phase. Players will complete the cards in their hand, and the game will end at the end of the round. Players will reveal their secret tasks and earn bonus points. The player that earns the most points wins. In the case of a tie, the players with the most 4-point cards wins.